Chapter 11. Enlighten my darkness. This period in my life was extremely dark. Looking back, I know that God was with me throughout this tough time. Why did I just leave Brisbane? It felt as though I had no light left inside of me. It felt as if I was full of darkness. I had seen a new way to live in the months prior and experienced some recovery in Brisbane. I was still going through a phase of discovery and was coming to a place of acceptance at that time. I was starting to understand that I had to surrender. I had to put my life down and just let go of everything I thought I knew. There was the smallest glimmer of hope I held on to. I just tried to ignore every temptation, every bad thought, every whisper of that voice in my head that was telling me to just use. It would say to me that it's all pointless. Just use, mate. There's a story about two sets of footprints in the sand along a beach. Then suddenly one of those sets of footprints aren't there anymore. The man gets to the end of his journey and looks back, getting angry at God and saying, "You weren't there for me. I had to walk alone." God replies and says, "I was carrying you." This is true for me during this period as I felt alone. But I am certain God was carrying me. I was now living back in Scarborough, back to where it all began. I was adamant that I was going to stay clean. I found some people in recovery in Perth and stuck with them. This was the one thing that helped me when in Brisbane. I knew there were people who were trying to get clean and stop using all around Australia, and I knew how to connect with them. When I was using and doing all this behaviour that I was ashamed of, I thought I was the only person in the world doing this sort of thing. I felt like an alien, an imposter, and I just felt wrong. Over in Brisbane, I found a group of people that had similar struggles. It helped me heal and to start to move forward in life again. Suddenly, one day God brought John into my life. John was 55 and a recovered heroin addict. He was 3.5 years clean. He was tall, had tattoos covering most of his body and a long beard. He wore black all the time. His right index finger was only half there. His voice was whiskey, and you could tell that he had seen a lot of things in his time. He started to take an interest in my situation. I struggled to talk to anyone, and even though I was begging for help, I didn't know how to ask. I felt as though John could see my struggle, so he started to support me. We would talk each day and he guided me through some of the challenges I was facing. Prayer became a major part of my life in Queensland. I started asking for a clean day in the morning and saying thank you at night. This developed over the 8 months I was clean in Queensland. It became like cleaning my teeth. I didn't know what I was praying to at the time, but that act of praying in the morning and at night comforted me, and still does. Prayer by this stage was a major part of my life. I would pray even when I relapsed. I believe this is what would pull me out of the relapses. John suggested that I go to a rehab clinic in Perth. As soon as I heard this, I said, "I don't need to do it. I've just done 8.5 months in rehab. Why would I go back?" Lovingly, John would say, "I hear you, mate, but maybe you need to go back in." He also explained how this rehab would be perfect for me and will support me in every way. Yeah, I'll think about it, John, but I'm not sure. A new concept for me, which I'm still familiarizing myself with, is that if it didn't work, maybe I was the problem. Maybe the rehab didn't work because I wasn't ready. I got back in touch with a few high school friends and was invited to go to a mate's 30th birthday party. I wasn't so sure about whether I should go. I was around 40 days clean again and was starting to make some progress. I had a car and was meeting more people that were healthy for me. Things started to look up again. There was a glimmer of hope after 30 days back in Perth. I still wasn't out of the woods though. It was touch and go in those early days clean, as every day I didn't know if I was going to pick up or not. The day of my friend's 30th, I called John and I asked what he thought. He said that it was up to me, and that if I did go, I could just call him if I was struggling. By 3 p.m, I had made my mind up. I was going, and I was going to go have a couple of drinks. It had all become too hard again. I arrived at the pub before anyone else got there and ordered a pint. When all my friends got there, they said, "What happened? We thought you didn't drink anymore." I said, "Yeah, that's all past me. I can drink now." As I had now experienced many times before, when I start drinking, I can't stop. At 11 p.m, I got in touch with a dealer and snuck out of there to go get on. I spent the next 2 days high on meth. This episode convinced me I had to go back into rehab. It was ridiculous the way I just caved in and did the one thing I was putting all my effort into not doing. Once I picked up again and started using more frequently, the foundation started to collapse. All problems in my life were a direct result of using, and I couldn't continue to deny it. I made the decision, with support from my friend John, to start the process of going to a rehab in Perth. The lead up going into the rehab ignited my desire to use again. It's like I just wanted to have one last hurrah before I gave up, but it never worked. It's like a switch for me. If I'm going to rehab, I want to use drugs. I see it as this big send-off, a sad love story that didn't work, saying goodbye to my one true love, meth. The only thing is that I'm broken every time, and things just get worse. I find it almost impossible to not use drugs before going into a rehab. It's dangerous territory, and the window is very small to stop using. I praise God that I'm clean today. Within 3 months of being back in Perth, I was back in a treatment centre in the northern suburbs of Perth. However, this rehab was different. It was community as method, or a therapeutic community. This treatment centre was the real deal. I was afraid of this place as it was intense. People with all sorts of personalities were there. A part of the treatment was that the residents called each other out on their good and bad behaviours, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. At any time in the day, a person can come up to you, point out a behaviour, and you must write it down. It's extremely confrontational, but it works. People change in this program and overcome their addiction. Landing there though, I realised I had a long way to go. Emotionally, I was unstable. Add in that the nicotine withdrawal was kicking in, which created an unpleasant couple of weeks. I slowly started to get familiar with what was going on and became more comfortable. By week 8, I started to find a bit of a groove. I got some privileges back and was healing emotionally and spiritually once again. You're either going forward or backwards in life. I've found that if I'm not moving forward, even slowly, I will start to slide backwards and build up that backwards momentum. It's hard to stop and change direction once you're going backwards. By week 11, I was having Saturdays out and going back to Mum's house to spend time with her. On this one day, I had a question to ask her. It had been on my heart for a while, but I wasn't in the position to bring it up. I felt stronger now, so I thought I would just ask her. Is Matthew my real dad, or is it someone else? Dal, that's a big question, Mum said. Just tell me, I need to know, I replied. She sat me down and said, Matthew isn't your biological father. In fact, it's another man that you haven't met. What? I was so angry. Why didn't you tell me? You're so selfish. I can't believe this, I said to Mum. Getting back into the rehab that night was tough, as that I had all this anger and so many questions. My entire being was flipped upside down. Even the way I looked at myself in the mirror changed. Everything changed that day. That whole side of my family was genetically removed in an instant. Sure, the bonds and connection I have with everyone over there remain. However, genetically, I see myself differently now, and I no longer see them as blood family. There is a difference. You can't ignore where you come from. So this news changed the way I viewed myself, my past, and my future. I held on in the rehab for 2 more weeks before I had this overwhelming urge to leave. I had to leave there for 13. I had been there for 13 weeks, but I didn't care. I wanted out. I was going to destroy myself once again. I packed my bags and went up to the office to tell them I was leaving. The staff said that it's not a good idea and I should sleep on it. Nah, I'm leaving. I went back to my room to pick up the last of my things, and when walking back to the office, a counsellor came up to me and we had a conversation. This conversation may have saved my life. She poured out some deep insights into my situation. I was so close to not leaving, but my mind was already made up, and I decided I had to leave. For this counsellor to come up to me and just say a few things that rang true at the perfect time was priceless. God's timing is always perfect. That night I was back using. I was hanging around some dodgy people and just felt numb. I was falling deeper and deeper back into my addiction and started not even caring about stopping. The risks and behaviour got worse and more unpredictable. Literally, within 2 weeks I had sold everything and spent all my money. I was back in with the Perth drug scene and started surrounding myself with some bad people. However, I wasn't cut out for this scene and never will be, especially after trying to get out of it for what seemed like so long. You change in rehab. So when you get back into the using scene, it's dangerous because you're more open and caring to people. It opens you up to getting ripped off. I would get ripped off all the time in that scene anyway. I was a loose cannon. A bit of a waste of space, which turned out to be a blessing because there is nothing in that world for me. Nothing whatsoever. I got into a hectic situation one night. I decided I would go to a dealer's house to see if I could get drugs on tick, which means you can get the drugs on the spot, then you pay back in a day or 2 or whenever is agreed. However, it's rare because no one ever pays each other back. I had a gut feeling it wasn't a good idea to go, but I went anyway. Before I walked in, I said a prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That night I was attacked and my leg was injured. My phone ran out of battery. I went on a mission to get drugs from the south side of Perth. I remember walking back to Scarborough, down Scarborough Beach Road at 4 a.m, limping and just screaming at the top of my lungs. Why? This has got to stop. I believe God gave me a sign that night. He disciplined me to show me how this path was going to go. I had a lot of time to think while walking to Scarborough that night. I was just hobbling up the main road in complete rage at myself. I was sick and tired of this cycle. I slept for 3 days while letting my legs start to heal. I was desperate now. So after 7 days lying in bed, I decided to say a prayer and ask God what I should do. Please show me what I need to do, God. Whatever it is, I will do it. I spent 30 minutes breathing and quieting my mind to try and hear what he was going to say. I got up and went to have dinner. The answer was right there. It was as clear as day. It was undeniable. God said to me that I needed to go back into rehab and stay for as long as I can. So that's what I decided to do. I was just going to trust that voice that said to go back into rehab. There was no other option. I had to trust it.